I had a customer walk in and drop the F-bomb on me multiple times. I was like, oh, wow, what happened here?
You got to win that trust back.
And it was brutal.
How do you stay humble when you've scaled a business from 225 roughly million to 750 million?
Success is never final. There's always somebody better, somebody stronger, obviously on a farm. So I think the work ethic still was the biggest piece.
How did growing up in a family business to run a dealership when you try to grow?
I grew up in a large family. I didn't even realize it as a kid that a lot of people didn't work like that. 6 o'clock in the morning till 6, 7 at night, a key foundation of how I was raised.
What's the biggest mistake companies make?
It really starts with people. If you don't build those relationships of trust, and I think that's what's missed a lot of times.
This is Heavy Hitters, and I'm Jay Lucas, a 30-year executive search veteran. And throughout my career, I've invested in the success of countless organizations. On this show, I interview industry-leading executives to highlight make-or-break strategies and tactics that drive performance. Ready to tackle some heavy lifting? Let's go.
All right. So before we get started, I just want to remind everybody or mention that today's podcast, all of our podcasts are really about the guest. They're not about me, and they're not about our guest today, Eric. We hope that you'll take some meaningful insights away from our conversation that you can apply and use to your benefit. So I'll go ahead and do a quick introduction. We've got joining us today, Eric Driscoll. He's a current Nashville resident where he lives with his family. Began his career as a GM at Stotts Equipment, later became CEO of their family enterprise, which includes ag operations of various types, including a truck dealership. Later became president of Ohio operations for AgPro, and most recently was the CEO for United Ag and Turf, where he led them through 20 acquisitions, if I remember correctly, 56 different locations. These are John Deere locations. This all took place over 4 years, growing revenue from 223 million to $750 million. So impressive. But before I get started and jump in with Eric, I'd like to just start with a quick prayer. So, Lord, I want to thank you for Eric and his commitment to leadership excellence in our industry. You tell us that when we seek you with our whole heart, that's when we'll find you. So today I ask for your blessings over Eric and his family, and that you'd help make his path straight. Pray for those who are listening, that they gain insights, and that you put on their heart a passion for making work a form of worship. Amen. Awesome.
Amen. Thanks, Jay.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. All right, so you and I have known each other not long, but we've interacted a few times over a short period. And so I appreciate you joining today. I'm eager to dig in. Some of this stuff we've talked about, but a lot of it is not stuff that we've gone into great depth. So I'm looking forward to jumping in. So with that, I am kind of curious. So you grew up on a farm operation.
Yes.
How did growing up in a family business, ag business in particular, multi-entity, how did that shape your approach to running a business or dealerships?
Yeah. I think first off, as I think on that question, again, I was very blessed to, I grew up in a large family. And there was a lot going on with a lot of different businesses.
Mm-hmm.
I think how it prepared me, first off, there was just a lot of work. I didn't even realize it as a kid that a lot of people didn't work like that because that's all I knew.
Right.
So, and obviously on a farm, it's 6 o'clock in the morning, even earlier sometimes till, 6, 7 at night.
Yeah.
And on weekends. And so that's just what you grow up with. So I think the work ethic still was the biggest piece. But, outside of that, I think, because I had a grandfather and then it's my dad and his brothers who are partners now, that they've just always been aggressive. So they were always expanding or growing or acquiring different businesses or starting new businesses. And so our farm was a multi-site business. It was pretty spread out. And then again, multi-industries.
Yeah.
And, as we grew and expanded, there was always a cleanup project or something you had to improve and make better. So I think that's really a key foundation of how I was raised. And that's helped me in my life and career.
Yeah, I've noticed in a lot of the interviews that I conduct with candidates in the market that many get into the industry because they grew up either in construction or they grew up in ag, a farm, family farm, whether they're raising cattle or livestock or, they're raising crops, and that same sort of work ethic. You can't not develop a work ethic if you want to make a living in ag or, running a farm. So I do hear that quite a bit.
It really is true. And, I have a grandfather he's still alive. I mean, I'm lucky both grandfathers are still alive. My grandfather on my dad's side, he's 92, still alive. And he just always preached work is play and play is work. So if you find a way to make it that, you're going to love it.
Yeah.
And he's right.
Man, what a great thing to learn as a kid, to be around enterprising people who are invested in you, not just because you're an employee, so to speak. I mean, these are family, so you're close. What a blessing.
Absolutely.
All right, so what do you think is the biggest mistake that dealerships or companies make when they try to grow through M&A?
Yeah, this, in my opinion, what I've seen, I've been on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
You've hit on some of the acquisitions. I've been part of some in my career where I was acquired too. So I think you learn to have a lot of empathy, and I've been fortunate to learn. It's interesting in life. You learn a lot of good from good people, and then you learn a lot of, even through bad experiences, what to do better. So I think for me, it's really starts with people. It's really making people first. I love the saying I heard years ago, and I've tried to live by it, that slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Mm.
And, you can share that in different ways, and everybody takes that a little different. But really being slow is being intentional, and it really isn't slow at the end of the day. But when you slow down and build those relationships of trust, and I think that's what's missed a lot of times.
Mm.
And I think the other thing on top of that is when it comes to people, again, I've just seen people try to sugarcoat stuff, and I feel like that's a lack of integrity.
Mm.
I think if something's going to change or it's going to be different, even if it's hard to stand in front of people and say that, you have to say that. Because if you don't, eventually it's going to come out that something changes, and then there's no trust in the room anyway. So those are the two quickest things that stand out for me.
Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. That's great. But do you feel like that's hard when you've got lots of capital being spent on assets and people are looking for really quick wins? Like, let's get on base.
Yes. And I think, again, like in that statement, I think you can make that statement and people think, oh, he wants to go slow. And in actuality, it's not. It's just actually saying that it may look slow when a leadership goes in and at first they're taking the time to connect with their key leaders and their people. That looks slow.
Right.
And it's actually not, though. It's actually the fastest thing you can do. Because when you get alignment and trust from people, then all of a sudden what looks slow actually becomes really fast.
Right. It reminds... sorry, go ahead.
From different experiences in multiple situations across a lot of years, I've been able to have success with that. And as fast as you want to go in there and just say, and shove numbers down somebody's throat or this or that, like it all has to happen at the same time. It's just you're making the focus on people while you're driving everything else still.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And obviously I'm in the people business, so I really relate to that. I have worked with so many companies where human capital or their people they're not seen as an asset. And there's so many leaders miss the mark on trying to tap into their potential. That's why there's so many books written about that. What you said, the whole slow is smooth and smooth is fast reminds me, Stephen Covey talks about sharpen the saw, one of the 7 habits.
Yep.
And it's kind of the same principle is what I'm picking up. Because if you don't stop to sharpen the saw, in this case, your saw is your people. And the connectedness, the trust that you have with them that you can establish is really the edge of the blade. And if you don't take care of it, you can be chopping away at a tree and spending a whole lot more energy and effort than you need to in order to accomplish the task. So
yes.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah. And it's, each situation I've been into has been very unique, so when you say that, like in our Northeast acquisitions, right? I mean, that was fast and furious even from day one, because that was 10 businesses, 25 locations on one day.
Right.
And, it wasn't one organization that had already been there forever that took over the rest of them. We were a new leadership team that came in using some of the current talent. We had to figure out who was who. But we also did that again, like really focused on our foundation of who we were, like where we're going, why we're going there, how we're going to get there.
Yeah.
But then doing everything we can to over communicate with people while there was a whole bunch of stuff going on, right, in those acquisitions. But people really felt part of something.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact, because I constantly heard it over 5 years, when people would say to me, I've never worked so hard in my life, but I've never had so much fun. That's when I knew like what we wanted to do was actually working.
Yeah, no question. No question. We could spend quite a bit of time just continuing down that path for sure. So I would describe you as a low ego leader. You've scaled a business from 225 roughly million to 750 million. How do you stay humble when you're achieving such wild success? Is humility overrated?
I don't think it is, no. And I think that's a daily challenge for all of us, let's be honest. And I think, I love to study people. I love to have conversations with people. And, and as you know, and we know, we do that mostly with ourselves, right? So what's the conversation we're having with ourselves? And I think the thing that's helped me, try to, to tamp that ego, like everybody, especially if you're competitive, you have some sort of ego there. But what does your ego need? And for everybody, that's different. I think for me, where I feel lucky and fortunate, because I've been around so many people who just they don't have much peace with themselves. And they're always looking for that title or the next rung on the ladder. I never set out in my career to be a CEO. I just never even thought about it. I just went to work. And I think for me, it's because I'm very confident in what I'm really good at. And I'm very comfortable with what I'm not.
Right.
And there's a lot of things that I'm not good at. And so I look at it as a football team as probably the best analogy I can use in business. I don't know if I've ever shared this one with you, but we're really good in sports. And even there, we struggle to look at a person's, how they're built, their height, their shape, whatever, and place them on a spot on a football team or a basketball team. But in business, we're not really good at assessing people's talents, their strengths, their weaknesses. Because if you took Tom Brady, the best quarterback of all time, put him on the offensive line, we would have never heard of him.
Right.
And in business, we make that mistake every day. We put people in spots they don't succeed. So for me, I've just always been very confident again, where I know I'm good and where I'm not. I try to find the best talent to put them around me. I think that keeps me humble all the time. I try to be humble all the time. Again, like I want to be the best, not just me, but whatever I'm leading. So there's that ego part of like, I always want to do better. I want to get better, but I always know that I'm never going to get where I want to get.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's okay to have ego drive. I think where I see a lot of people fail, you mentioned, some people that just don't have a sort of inner peace. I think it's okay to have the drive, the ego drive. It's a matter of not letting that take over. So I've just learned throughout my life and throughout my career that sometimes too much of a good thing isn't good. And so if you can harness that ego and focus it on productive things, healthy things. Again, I go back to a Stephen Covey thing, and it's the begin with the end in mind.
Absolutely.
It is at the end of my days, if I have people from every aspect of my life showing up at my funeral and they're going to say something about me, what is it that they're going to say? And then am I living my life in a way that's going to help those people say something about me that I'll be proud of, that legacy?
I 100% agree with you, Jay. I mean, really, I preach this all the time. One, we're here to be the best. We're looking for excellence because average is not exciting.
Right.
That's not what gets us out of bed.
Right.
I love to ask people all the time, like, did you ever take a job or anything where you said, I can't wait to go work with that company and be the average employee? And nobody thinks that way, but yet every day we settle for average if we don't push ourselves over that next hurdle.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that, and knowing that success is never final, like no matter, on Tom Brady again, I love to follow his career.
Yeah.
And I love when he just said his favorite ring was his next ring. And that was where that drive always came. And that's just how I try to live my life. It's how I try to raise my kids. Like,
Yeah.
success is never final. There's always somebody better, somebody stronger. So, and always be learning, always observe everybody around you and try to learn. So,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right. If you could only focus on a single metric to run a dealership, parts, service, sales, financials, employee engagement, customer, net promoter score, is there one that you obsess over? Is that an impossible question?
Here's how I could start to answer that. And then I'll try to give you like what, if there is going to be some one or a few metrics. That to me kind of feels like asking a pilot, what's the most important, thing when he goes and flies a plane. Well, and as you and I both know, well, there first has to be a plane. There has to be a pilot who's been trained. There has to be a flight plan.
Right.
Then all the metrics of flying a plane, right? Like all the things when they go to take off, with your power and airspeed and like all those things.
Service crew, making sure that the plane's, airworthy. Like, yeah.
100%.
Yeah, that's actually a great way to look at it.
I think when I look at a business, that's where I have a hard time, because you do hear a lot of people just say, it's profit, or it's gross margin, or it's employee engagement, or it's, and obviously every metric, there's obviously the most crucial metrics, and there's obviously lead metrics and lag metrics. There's all these things.
Right.
I don't like to pin it down on one, but if I was to give you a few, I mean, obviously, culture, which shows up in your employee engagement, to me is vital. There's a lot of HR metrics. I'm a big HR fan because, a lot of senior leaders or CEOs don't keep HR close to them. I do. I always have. It's just so vital.
Yeah.
From your onboarding experience to your training programs, your engagement, safety,
performance management,
100%.
a succession planning. It is I had another show, my Wade, who is my right hand, he and I had a conversation about sort of the gap between organizational strategy and talent strategy, and how so many companies miss that. They see HR as this tactical sort of check the box, and it's all administration of important programs, but they miss the organizational development part, the core values, the aligning of the people, the org structure alignment, the core competencies needed in each job, how they screen for that in an interview process, how they evaluate that if, with your current employees. When there's a gap, how do you build programs to help increase that person's capacity and just having rigor to that? And that is the one thing I see is the greatest piece missing in so many businesses, that leadership misses the organizational development part of HR.
I 100% agree with you, Jay. And again, I think that's the biggest challenge most new CEOs face, or even if they've been a CEO for a long time, if they've never made that a priority. Because again, as a shareholder and as an owner, let's say, like, they're obviously at the end of the day most concerned about profit, but they also know all these different, metrics and practices, right, matter to the business. Because if you don't put those things first and foremost, you may have a great year and think you're doing great, but if all those things aren't in line, you're going to have short-lived success. And that's not what it's about, right? It's about sustained long-term success.
Right. Yeah. I think there are a lot of businesses, this is not unique to the heavy equipment industry, that they're successful in spite of themselves. They are profitable, maybe not as profitable as they could be, but profitable enough that, do I really want to put that much more effort and energy into it?
Correct.
And so they don't. So they're never great. They generally have cultures that don't promote individual thinking and problem solving, and therefore they don't move into excellence. Are you a reader? Do you read books?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Do you have a book or two that you're like, wow, this really had a huge impact on my career?
Yeah, I've got a few I can think of off the top of my head, and then I'll hit on a couple other things, because back to what you said, and it's funny, my first book that comes to my mind, you've already mentioned a couple times, is 7 Habits.
Yeah.
Right. So, I read that one when I was in college, read it a couple times since. I actually have a leadership training program I've used in different CEO roles. And actually one of our first modules is to read that book. So again, I'm a huge fan of 7 Habits. So many just great stuff out of there.
Loaded.
A few others. Oh, go ahead, Jay.
No. I was just saying it's loaded.
Yeah,
It is loaded with such good info. And it's not just business. This is life application stuff too.
100%. And I think at the end of the day, when you look at Seven Habits, and it's like all these books or anything great that you do, I should say this at the end, but the biggest, here we are at a new year. There's a lot of, everybody likes to set a new year, a resolution. Really the biggest challenge I see with most people I've come across is being, like when you set a goal or you're trying to build a new habit, it's being very consistent, right? And that's where it breaks down. Like people just have a hard time staying consistent with whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I think Seven Habits does a great job of showcasing that. But, a few other ones are the 5 dysfunctions of a team.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I read that in college. Read it several times.
Another great book.
Traction. I don't know if you've ever read that book.
Yeah. We deployed Traction about 8 years ago. So we haven't just read it. So it's not just an academic thing for us. It is a part of our day to day. It's really life-changing for us from a business perspective.
You're spot on. I've used so many resources from that in leading organizations, from our foundation of a business to our meetings, even running a meeting.
The is
good news.
Oh my gosh.
Culture.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how simple it is.
Yeah.
But you would think because it's simple that maybe you don't yield that much in return. But
correct.
There's one thing to have strategy. It's the execution of that strategy and the accountability to it that is a big miss for most companies. Again, that's where talent strategy fits in. Because if you're going to sit down and do a business strategy, you got to look at it from a balanced scorecard perspective. Customer, people, operations, and financials, and make sure that you don't set up competing priorities between those.
Yes.
So if you drive profit to the bottom line by cutting your highest performing sales reps, that'll be a short-term gain in profitability, but it's going to have really damaging consequences. And then what's that going to say to the rest of the team? Yeah, Traction. So Traction, 5 Dysfunctions, and 7 Habits. I'm a big fan of all 3 of those.
Yeah, and then, I've read several Malcolm Gladwell books. I don't know if you've read any of his, but the Outlier book, just a fabulous book if you haven't read it, or anybody listening. That's a game changer. But he's got several. Oh, you would love it.
Yeah, and it's going into my my Amazon cart here when we finish up.
And if you've never read any of his books, they're all great. He's such a great storyteller, but he's using like real life things. He's really good at just taking stories that you think are one way and showing you how they really are.
Yeah.
So that's a great one. CEO Excellence is one I read back 2-3 years ago. It's a great book.
Okay.
Just something else, because I'm really big, as you said, on Sharpen the Sword.
Yeah.
So, I've loved podcasts as well, but I got onto a masterclass. I don't know if you have that app, but I got onto masterclass sessions probably 1.5, 2 years ago. And I can't get enough of them. I listen to them all the time.
Huh.
So,
yeah, no, I'll have to look into that for sure. I'm like you. I just like to learn. I find that I don't have enough time in the day. It starts as soon as I get up in the morning and it ends, when I go to bed, it seems like. I don't know. There's maybe a couple of hours where my wife and I do mind-numbing stuff, but yeah, I love to learn. So the masterclass, it's an app, you said.
Yeah, it's an app and a website, and they just got a bunch of very successful. It'll blow your mind. There's so many great stuff. Successful people. Usually an hour to 2, some are longer, of masterclass sessions on just all these different successful people and how they've done it. It's great stuff.
Do you have a morning routine?
Yes. I am, as my wife will sometimes say, I'm consistently very boring, because I'm just I'm rigid with my routine. But really my daily routine starts in the evening of the previous night. I'm just making sure I have everything laid out, for the next day on my calendar. But yeah, I wake up early and work out. If I have a hobby, honestly, it's working out.
Yeah.
I love the exercise, and the older I've gotten, not that I'm very old still, but that is even more crucial.
Yeah.
And obviously in a lot of these big jobs, if you're not healthy physically and mentally, you're not going to be emotionally healthy. And so, yeah, it starts at 5 o'clock with my workout. And then, it's getting ready and then spending that time, as we just talked about, on sharpening the sword. I've taught my kids, there's one thing that I just, it's a pet peeve of mine. Whenever I hear somebody say, I don't have time, I'm like, no, don't ever use that term. Say, I didn't make time.
Right.
So it's all about how you structure your day, structure your time. Cause like I hear people say that and I'm like, I'll bet you surf social media for an hour, and if you could have given up 30 minutes of that for a 30-minute run, but obviously that if you don't wake up early, you're not going to get that jump start on most people. And it doesn't matter if it's the weekend, I'm a firm believer in waking up early and getting a jump start on your day and on life. And that's what I think that's the separator with people.
Yeah, for sure. Well, maybe that's too where the conditioning of your being raised in, a farm and ranch operation is helpful for you. Like you're already conditioned. I will spout Stephen Covey all the time. So he made a point. He said, your body is the physical instrument through which you do everything. So why would you not take care of it? So that always stuck with me. And so, I generally will start. I have quiet time where I pray and read, kind of building my spiritual strength. Then I work out. But like you, I think my wife would say that I'm structured and boring. Maybe she wouldn't admit to saying that I'm boring, but she probably does feel that way. But she's got her own morning routine too. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
All right. So I want to shift to kind of M&A. Obviously, you've got some really, really unique and coveted experience, not just in terms of, mergers and acquisitions, but the growth side of that, like significant. These are big. This is a lot. Do you have an acquisition strategy? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. In general, I have a CEO playbook, I call it, which is my outline for how I go in and operate, whether it's an acquisition mode or just going in. So I've got my first things first, right? You go in and as far as mergers and acquisitions, we also built a playbook that's basically all the checklists, right? From your pre-close to closing and your post-close.
Is that something you developed yourself, or did you have an investment banker like who was part of a transaction kind of walk you through? Here's a good sort of recipe on start to finish.
That's a great question. I would say it was a blend of stuff I'd done in the past, and then also had seen from like our sister company in Texas. They had several acquisitions, so we took some of their formatting.
Okay.
And then we looked at some of our expectations of stuff in front of us. And we also, I would say from like 3 or 4 different angles, we put this all together.
Yeah.
It was very basic in one sense, very simple, all the checklists, but then what area of the business, so who's accountable for them, responsible. And then, as we've already said, being structured on your follow-up. It's one thing to have a plan and go start. And as we all know, one of the biggest breakdowns of business is starting everything and finishing nothing. So having that follow through to make sure everything gets checked and gets completed, that's on us as leaders all the time to make sure we get that done. So we basically built our spreadsheets of our task lists. So that's the one side I'll say of like, and again, how I like to look at business is, there really is leadership and management. And to me, they're two totally separate things. Some people are very good leaders and very weak at managing. Some people are the opposite. I'd say most are the opposite. Most are good managers. And there's a lot of business books out there on that most companies are over managed and under led. For me, it's always trying to balance that. And really where management starts for me is you're trying to connect hearts and minds, right? You're trying to motivate, inspire people. That's leadership. And to me, that comes from your foundation, like who we are, but like where we're going, why we're going there, how we're going to get there.
Vision and values.
Yep. Vision, purpose, values. And we drove that not just one time or on a paper or on our intranet, but every key meeting that we had, I would kick off all those, like our year-end leadership summits. Let's say our sales, parts and service, year-end meetings. I would kick those off. I wouldn't run the whole meeting, but I would always kick them off and I would go into every part of that. On a good news, I would do a good news email to the company. Not every single Monday, but almost every, probably 85, 90% of the time, I would have good news and I would drive something from that. Like, here's what's going on good. There's always tons of challenges. And our employees, we're always down their neck about everything that needs to be improved. But if we're not celebrating, also showing what's going good,
Yeah.
I think that's a failure. So that's also just a key piece of going in and providing hope and vision. Here's where we're going again.
Yeah.
And then on the management side, yeah, it's really you start to look at really what I call a circle of success. I've worked for some great people in my career. I've learned a lot of this from them. Our CEO of Stotz Equipment is Tom Ristozzi. I worked for him years ago. He's a great example. He taught me a lot. And when you look at that circle of success, it starts with your people and your teams, and then your systems and processes. I like to look at really your products and services after that, where your KPI and drivers, and customer experience, and then your profit performance, financial. And that's really a circle that really feeds on each other. As long as there's so many things underneath each one of those, you have to be watching, but that's the management side.
Yeah.
So those are the two things you got to bring together and drive. And that's a lot to do, especially as you're going through acquisitions, mergers and acquisitions. But I've seen it get pulled off extremely well. It's always better when the talent from those are 100% aligned, and they never are 100% aligned. So you find the people that are. And I've seen some people I thought weren't going to work out, and they worked out great. And some people from day one you thought would be great, and they weren't great at all. So it's an interesting.
Yeah. Is there a key to integrating acquisitions without destroying what made the business successful to start with?
And just being frank and honest, sometimes I think that, going through 20 acquisitions, let's say in the last venture, there were a couple of those that basically we had to tear down just all the way down on bare bones.
Yeah.
It just completely a mess in so many different ways for a variety of reasons. And that's not being critical of like the way, but obviously when you're a single store or 2 or 3 store, and what that owner's purpose is for being in business is different than ours. So it's not fault. It's just, like I can speak of one acquisition. There was a 3 store that was our most challenging. And we literally had to start from the inventory from bare bones. Like there was no bin location matched up.
Oh, wow.
Had a technician smoking in the shop while they were working. When you have that kind of environment.
Next to the gas can?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
There's a lot of stories that go along with that. But those are the tough ones. And then there's ones where the organization was very well run. Yes, there's still changes, right? Business systems, goals, but a lot of people are excited for the change. So very, very independent situations.
Awesome. If you're, where do, in your opinion, I mean, because obviously you can't speak for other people, but just from your experience, is there a place where people get the acquisitions wrong? Like, is there a kind of a common sort of, this is the most common failure point if you're acquiring a business?
From my experience, the biggest failures I've seen is just when the people aren't valued, when there's a lack of communication or a lack of respect. Like, you can still change things. And again, I've had some people not like me. I mean, every leader has people that don't like them. But I've also had a lot of people even say, hey, I didn't like what you said, but I can appreciate that you said it.
Yeah.
I've seen just some situations where people have come in and not been just forthright on this is what's going to change when they're asked the question. Hey, if you don't want to ask it, don't have an open forum and allow people to ask a question, But I think that's the biggest miss in general. It does come down at the end of the day to people. People are going to be there running the business before it's acquired, after it's acquired. If they feel listened to and respected, you have a much better chance of keeping that talent long term. And not everybody does stay. Maybe a lot of them shouldn't stay at the end of the day too. There are those situations. But your goal still is to try to find a way to provide hope and inspiration. And I've had some people who at first didn't want it, maybe stayed for a few months, left, and came back. I've had a lot of those situations in mergers and acquisitions. And those are a lot of fun stories as well, because I realized that you are trying to do this the right way.
Right.
I was just frustrated with change.
Yeah.
So
it kind of reminds me of a stray cat, a kitten. And there's clearly not trusting of you. Your intentions are great. You want to feed it, you want to pet on it, I show it some love, protect it, but it doesn't want any part of that until you establish a level of trust where the consistency gets it to a point where slowly over time, it gets closer and then hangs around more and then lets you love on it. I kind of feel like people in organizations where they've not been valued are sort of like that stray cat that is skeptical because they just don't know what your intentions are. And until you establish that kind of trust, they'll keep you at an arm's length, and then you'll never really maximize their potential for their benefit, not for yours. Not like it's a Jedi mind trick or anything. It's just, until they believe they can trust you, they're never going to reach their full potential, and you're never going to reach the organization's full potential.
I completely agree. That actually goes back to what I said when we talked earlier, that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. It does take that precious time and attention, especially with key people you need to drive a business, to build that trust. And once that trust is there and they know they can trust you, they will do anything. And I try to preach all the time to people, and so many leaders miss this, right? Like we've all had good leaders and bad leaders, but yet so many people, when they start leading people, or even people I've led and they turn and they want to be treated one way, they turn right around and do the opposite to their people. I'm like, be the type of leader that they would follow you over a cliff, not push over a cliff.
Yeah.
If we could all learn to do that a little better all the time, that's a journey for all of us, but that's what it is about.
Yeah. That's where principles like begin with the end in mind really help, because you can stop for just a second. And then you as a leader, if you have leaders underneath you, your next reports, and they're demonstrating a certain behavior that's countercultural, the fact that you're patient with them to remind them, hey, don't forget core values. Don't forget, what do you want them to say about you at your funeral? Whatever that is, that you can help just sort of reset that mindset of theirs.
Yes.
Is there a point professionally where you began to realize that systems were critical, that you needed to systematize everything?
Yeah, and again, I feel lucky from a very young, I call it a young age. In my early 20s was my first job in a dealership arena. I was a service manager for Stotz Equipment's location in Salt Lake. And I still say to this day, like Stotz Equipment was the best administratively run business I've been a part of. So I've always been trying to live up to them. They've done a really good job of how they have run so many things. They're a great family, great people, great business. But when I was in my young 20s, I was a service manager. On day one, I literally walked in and they said, here's our website, like our intranet, and here's your financials, here's your financial model, here's our audit for your processes, etc. And I watched other people that were hired after me feel intimidated with that. And for me, that was empowering. Yeah. Actually, it was like they're actually trusting me with all this information. I wasn't the GM of the store. I was the service manager, and I still had that for my department.
Wow.
But they had great systems and processes and procedures. And so I learned a lot of that from them. And then I utilized that after I left them in some different roles. Then I worked for them a second time down in Phoenix and learned even more there. When I went back to be the CEO of the family business, we went through a whole change with our company was actually in QuickBooks, which was crazy at that time, as big as we were. So we had a conversion into NetSuite. And so going through that conversion, systems, it just shows you all the time. If you do not have the right systems, and the talent to manage those systems, and leaders who believe in the accountability of those systems, and you try to scale, you're going to have all kinds of problems.
Gosh.
When we went into this acquisition in the Northeast, and it was a chore because of our 10 acquisitions, only 2 of them, I believe, were on the same business system that we were going to keep. So every month we would take down others off their system and go on to our new system. And that was a 6-month process to get everybody onto one. But then we also, we started just building a bunch of custom systems to handle our scale and growth, from Power BI reports that we sketched out, drew, built, to even a bunch of other, fully custom software pieces we developed just to manage the scale. Because when you go that quickly from even the first 25 locations, but then to 56, it's a workload. And if you don't have data integrity, as you well know, that you're running blind. So it was a mad dash to get the system right.
Yeah, it's really hard. I've always said that technology is only as good as its user. And you can tell the level of user by the process behind what they do, being able to actually walk you through end to end. This is how we do it. All right. So
Yeah.
do you feel like standardizing things and having those systems standardized, does that at all, have you seen or experienced, or do you have an opinion about, does that rob managers from the autonomy to be able to do what they want?
It does. I mean, there's definitely that challenge to a certain level, I have to say.
Hmm.
At the same point, and I try to preach this all the time as we went through a lot of growth and change. And again, it's not like you took a bunch of people from even a 10-store operation, they joined a 56. Most of them came from a single store or a 2 or 3 store. What you try to teach them, help them understand and see, again, back to like, if you're flying a plane, very different if you're in the cockpit or if you're in the back seat. How come the pilots go in this direction, or how come he's going over, et cetera. So trying to over communicate the why is such a crucial piece. And even as much as you do, some people will always grumble. There's no way to make everybody happy. It's like having, I have 4 kids. If I say, hey, let's go to dinner, all 4 of them want to go somewhere different. But when you have 1,000 employees, you have 1,000 different minds that want to pull in a different direction. But, if McDonald's, like I use this all the time, if McDonald's can build restaurants all over the world and plug in 16 and 17-year-olds to work in their system, they've done something right.
And know that from one store to the next, it's going to be done the same way.
Correct.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
That was our journey. That was our mission. We weren't there yet at United, but we had built a lot of that.
Yeah.
And that was our constant journey. Like our service departments, we went through a huge change there. It was like we had to build the kitchen the same way. Because that's your first issue. Like every location's built a little different, but we got to make sure the kitchen looks the same and functions.
Yeah.
And then we have to train them all the same, hold them accountable all the same. And
that requires a lot of capital. Not. I mean, it's time, effort, energy, but it also requires a lot of capital. Not everybody has it.
No, it's really hard. And so you have to do your best job to systematize, because if you don't, you're going to have stores that are doing it completely different. And I've been there before. And so it is trying to align that.
Yeah.
And as we brought our service departments together again, multiple times a year, our management, and you show them the why, a lot of them, they would understand. Even if they didn't like it still, they understood, okay, I understand why I need to do it this way. Even within that, we try to give a lot of leeway, right? Here's the way you have to open a work order, close it, quote it, close it. But there's some leeway on how they all handle things in between there.
Right.
But at the end of the day, we have to handle that all the same.
All right. So some of the acquisitions at United, you were ag and then expanded into construction.
Correct.
Is it different? Is running a construction store different than an ag store?
Yeah. It is. Like I'll say there's a but there. It's interesting because in the ag business, you're dealing with a huge variety. You have a lot of B2B and a lot of B2C. And, every region's different. I've been obviously in multiple regions in the country. The Northeast was really unique in the John Deere world for the ag side because it was so much more small tractor and lawnmower than anywhere else in the country. So, our large ag market was only probably 10% of our business.
Right.
Small tractor was 80, 90% of our business. So very different. But even from there, right, dealing with a farmer with a chopper or a homeowner who walks in looking for whether it's a push behind mower or a lawnmower, very different customer needs. So I would kind of look at construction the same way. Like a large ag John Deere dealership is a lot more closer to a construction business. But again, still different. Now you're selling equipment, you got service, you have parts. There's a lot of technology on these machines now. So you're trying to manage all that. But so really it's the same business model with different customer needs. And so making sure that your team's set up to handle those customer needs is really the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
But even at construction, right? Like in the Deere world where you have working, so we had road paving, their customer requirements were completely different from other contractors too.
Right.
So I think it was just helping our teams understand, like, yes, these are still different in a sense, but they're very similar in a sense. Let's make sure we know our customers and we can take care of those specific needs.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Let's talk about culture for a second. I think, has there been a part in your career where you've left an organization because of philosophical misalignment or disagreements about culture?
I can only think of one where I was with a company that I felt like there was a gap in that piece. I've been very fortunate. And again, I've moved around a lot, had a lot of different roles, but when opportunity comes knocking, that's generally why I've left and joined other organizations. There was just one time when I was with an organization that I felt like our leadership styles, our values weren't really aligned. And, it wasn't that mine were right and theirs were wrong. They were just different.
Right.
And I think at the end of the day, like respecting those differences, I still worked just as hard on my last day working for them as I did my first day. I never let it slow me down. But, I'm a firm believer that you need to go where you can lead your authentic way, where you feel valued in who you are just from an authentic, view. So
yeah,
that's the only experience I can think of.
What did you learn from that? How will you use that information, that experience moving forward?
I think initially I just use it more for respecting people. If I'm leading an organization, if there are people who want to leave, because again, I am very structured and forthright, and here's who we are, right? Here's the vision, here's the purpose, here's our values, here's the goals of the organization. So we're looking for excellence, and respecting people within their views. Some people might not want to push that hard, right? To be excellent. I think so. First, I think it's respecting other people if they want to leave and go somewhere else. I've never gotten mad at an employee who wants to leave or angry, and I've also felt fortunate that I was never really going to lose somebody that I felt like I can't live without this person. But at the end of the day, that's a big one. And then again, I've been in that situation in a merger acquisition. And I just think some steps were missed on showing appreciation to some of the talent in the organization. And it's just respect for other people at the end of the day.
Do you take that experience too? If you're to enter into a job search, is a job search sort of like looking at an acquisition? Do you kind of look at a new job opportunity, kind of almost like an acquisition?
100%. In really any level of the organization, but especially as in a senior level, it's like a marriage. You want to make sure that you really enjoy them and they enjoy you, because there's going to be a lot of hard times. There's going to have to be a lot of hard conversations, because when you're dealing with performance, you just have to be open and frank. I've been fortunate to work though for a lot of really, really good people and be in those environments where you can just be brutally honest and forthright with what's going on, good and bad. So yeah, it's a key piece for sure.
How much do you think Tom Brady's success in New England was a cultural thing? Not taking away from his skill set, because clearly he's insane and gifted that way. But do you think if you put him on the Cleveland Browns?
That's a great question. It's no doubt.
No offense,
right?
Cleveland.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which we still feel sorry for Cleveland. I think it's like anything that's especially long-term sustained success, like the success that Brady had with the Patriots. There's no doubt that it wasn't just about Brady.
Yeah.
Right. Especially in football. There's no doubt that, Belichick was a great coach. Obviously, do I think that Brady, made him look even better? If he hadn't had Brady, obviously we know what his record is without Brady.
Yeah.
But we saw Brady go on to another, very talented team and win another Super Bowl. So some players just, like, they do have that aura about them. And Brady, as good as he's been, as hard as he's worked, the ego has always been in check. And other players took less money to go play with them. Yeah. And Brady took less money, so the company had more money to pay other players.
Yeah.
Like, he created the success and the brand. And so, there's no doubt that a lot of players can't overcome. Do I think Brady would have won the Super Bowl with the Cleveland Browns if he would have went there at the end of the Patriots? No, he wouldn't have. So he was really intelligent too, how he chose which opportunity to go chase.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a great question. I like that.
Yeah. All right. So I think in one of our conversations, you had mentioned at one of the organizations, there was morale issues. There was customer distrust. Net promoter scores like 33%. And you were able to get it to, I don't know, 78% over a period of time. Obviously, that doesn't happen overnight.
Yes, correct.
For people who don't know what NPS is, can you explain that? And how do you deploy that if you don't have it in place?
Yeah, so NPS is Net Promoter Score. And in essence, there's surveys that go out to customers.
Mm-hmm.
In this specific situation, this was a large ag dealership. So very limited amount of surveys even went out because we didn't have a huge customer pool, right? Like it wasn't like in Maine or up in the Northeast where we had thousands and thousands.
Yeah, the B2C part of it, where your customer list was so much bigger. Yes,
exactly. So in the Net Promoter Score process, if it's not a 9 or a 10, it's actually negative. It counts harder against you if it's in the 1 to 4 range. But even in that middle range, a neutral doesn't help you. So I knew when I went in there and I looked at the score where it was, I looked at the amount of surveys that were going to go out on an annual basis because a limited customer pool. I'm like, there's no way we're going to flip this in a year. This is going to be a multi-year process to get that score to where we want it.
You got to win that trust back.
Yeah. And it was brutal. I mean, it was brutal with I didn't realize when I took the job, I knew it was a newly acquired store, but I didn't realize that the store morale was so low. The employees were very angry. And I didn't realize the customers felt that way. My first day in the office, I had a customer walk in and drop the F-bomb on me multiple times. Cool. And I was like, oh, wow, what happened here? But really, you don't panic in those situations. That's what leadership does. You sit there and you assess the situation, right? And okay, what do we need to do to change this? And how I attacked this situation myself. Again, I was a GM in this role. I met with my team. Again, I had to win them over too at the same point. And part of that winning them over was I had a weekly lunch with different employees every week. And just to share one story, there was a guy still works there. He was a parts sales rep. I think at this point he'd been there 27 years. And when I took him to lunch, he literally said to me, he goes, "This is the first time management's ever had lunch with me." And I was like, maybe that's not shocking to a lot of people, but for me, that's where you take people out, you get out of the office, build that trust. And so, I started doing that, but when it came to and so I needed to build the trust with them so they could in turn have that trust and confidence, and they're going to help win the customers over. But then I also set in my schedule every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or it was flipped. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I was going out and doing some customer visits. And I'm going to tell you, they were brutal at first. I had a guy that sicked his pit bull after us.
My God.
And he had literally driven across multiple states to go buy $100,000 worth of parts.
Oh my gosh.
From another dealer up in Colorado.
Oh.
Here we are south of Phoenix. $100,000 worth of parts because we took away a discount he used to have. And so there was just a lot of trust building. But I can say when I left there, that guy and I were great friends. That's what it was about, right? It was showing up and keeping your word, doing everything we could for him. And again, it was a journey. We didn't flip that score, but again, we set it was probably within the first 60 days, we set that goal to hit our Net Promoter Score at 80 within 3 years.
Did you track not just the result, but how many people actually took or completed the survey?
Yeah. So our corporate office with that group, they sent out the survey. So they knew who they were surveying. They knew how many per year, which customers were going to get the survey. So we got the feedback. Our store got it. We knew who got surveyed, what they said. So our leadership team at the store level, we took that and said, we're gonna beat down the door. We're gonna win these customers over.
So was it an automatic trigger? Did you build it into your system that when a work order was closed or a new machine was purchased, that there was this automation of, we'd like to get your feedback? Or did corporate really selectively just sort of randomly say, okay, well, we're going to do every, fifth transaction, we're going to send a survey?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't an automated sort through that. There was some automation, but it wasn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
They had it set up, and our A and B customers were a higher priority too. So the A and B customers were the biggest focus, even though more were being done.
And A and B was categorized by
their volume of business.
Billable. Revenue.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. Yeah. It's interesting. I have suppliers and I get Net Promoter Score, invitations to provide feedback. If you do regular interactions with somebody a lot of times, I'm not going to fill it out. Unless there's something that's dramatically changed, I'm probably not going to fill it out every single time. And so I'm just curious if, how, and then another thing I find curious is if they don't fill it out, do you send it to them again? Is there a follow-up to that? Like, is it possible that email got buried and you just want to remind them? And how much reminding is too much before you feel like you're badgering or before they feel like they're badgered?
That's a really good question. I think we didn't really have much of that issue in the B2B. I think they were so eager to review us, whether good or bad.
Yeah, right.
If it was bad, it's almost like they're more eager to like tell you.
They're just waiting for that email to come in.
Yeah. And, this was it was south of Phoenix, but a very small ag world. So they all talked to each other, all the coffee shop. And, it was fun to flip that. It was a fun challenge. But so many didn't like us. And 3 years later, it was great.
Yeah. Man, that's awesome. So I told you that we implemented traction and when you start, you set your 10-year BHAG, your big, hairy, audacious goal. And it's supposed to be somewhat out of reach. Not so far out of reach that it's like, we're never going to get this and nobody's motivated, but it's got to be a stretch, And we're discussing internally, what's going to be our BHAG? And I think the knee-jerk reaction for pretty much most people is it's either a revenue or profit number. And, I love revenue. I'm a sales guy, so I love revenue. But as a business owner, I've come to love profit a lot more. But neither one of those are really, I feel like those are symptoms. Those are manifestations of how well you do in serving your customer. That if you do that well, the rest will take care of itself. So how do you take care of your people and how do you take care of your customers? And the financial numbers generally will work themselves out. But we don't send out NPS per se, but we do collect customer feedback, and it is our driving force. So a lot of the wins that we talk about are, we just got another 5-star review, and we celebrate that because it's a reminder. That's that communicate and over communicate. Like, we can't lose sight of the fact that 5 stars is what we're after. So when we get it, we can't not call it into everybody's view. And so I share it with everybody, not just the person who got the review, but with the entire team as a reminder to everybody.
Which is awesome, Jay. I mean, I mentioned to you earlier that in my good news email I would send out. So every review our company got on a Google for all the locations, I got all those reviews.
Yeah.
I wanted to see all of them, whether they were good or bad. And it was great to see that our stores on average, we average nearly a 4.4.
Oh, yeah.
Which I was glad to see because of all the traction.
But
I highlighted all those. And I would copy and paste. I would always highlight if they mentioned the employee by name.
Yeah.
I wanted people to see that. So when I sent out good news, I would copy and paste every one of those 5-star reviews.
Yeah.
And if there was a bad review, again, that wouldn't go out in good news. But when it would go out was when we turned it from a 2-star to a 5-star.
Yeah.
I'd go back and I'd copy that and I'd put it back in our good news. And those were actually my favorite.
Yeah.
And I learned this early in my career that your most loyal customer will not be the customer you never failed. It'll actually be the customer you failed and how you fixed it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen that over and over in my career. Those are the exciting ones.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, there's something about overcoming failure, demonstrating a genuine interest in wanting to correct and improve. I see that. Look, take your kids. They're little. If they're playing a sport, you're more proud of them, even if they lose a game. Just the effort that they put at trying to get better, and so yeah, it's fun to see. It's a fun experience to be able to turn someone around. Puts a lot of wind in your sails for sure, and your people, especially when you put it in a Good News Monday email. How much time did you spend putting your Good News email together? That sounds like a lot of work.
It really wasn't that bad. It was probably maybe an hour a week at the most.
Okay.
Like if there was a ton of reviews, because I'd go through all the I'd get an email from our gal that monitored them. She'd forward me every email.
Was it generally around your NPS or a Google review? Was that generally your Good News Monday email was largely centered around that? Or were there other things that you looked at? Like where you saw an employee do something that aligned with a core value?
Yeah, it wasn't centered around our reviews, but yet I put those in every letter. So I would make sure I got those copied to me. If I missed a week, again, there'd be extra but I would put both weeks. I would go through, capture them. But it was really about just sharing what was going on in the business that was good. Sometimes it'd be, our brand new store just opened up, have a bunch of pictures. I'd show the old location, our new location, how much better it looked, better employee, customer experience, or our purpose initiatives. We were engaged in a lot of those. Or if we had a leadership meeting, things we were talked about. Or if we had a meeting with Deere and that went well, maybe hit on some highlights and Deere likes what they're seeing us do.
Yeah.
You're just trying to keep people informed and plugged in. And when you have 56 locations, 1,000 employees, it's easy for people, especially that when we acquired all these little businesses, they don't feel like part of anything. So I started doing that probably a year and a half into our venture in the Northeast. And I actually I'd done it for about a year and a half. And then I actually asked our senior leadership team would meet on a quarterly basis. And our executive team actually met each week. There were 4 of us, but then our senior team, our top roughly 15 people.
Was HR in your 4?
No. So that was just my CFO, my presidents. And then I met with HR on a weekly basis.
Okay.
I had a one-on-one. And then she was part of our senior team. So our top.
Right. Got it.
And so I asked the team after about a year of doing it, I'm like, hey guys, should I keep doing this? Is this cheesy? And everybody in the room said, no, you need to keep doing it. Everybody talks about that email when it comes out. So I was happy to hear that it meant something to them.
Yeah, that's great. It does. It's funny when I think about compensation, generally when you're talking to somebody who's looking for a job, compensation centers primarily around money. It's monetary compensation. But the compensation that seems to really be the driver for most people when it comes to career choice and job satisfaction isn't monetary. It's non-monetary, like recognition. Yeah. That's a form of compensation. The ability to actually work towards a goal and to have leadership take hurdles down instead of put hurdles up. That's a form of compensation. I mean, who wants to be in a job where somebody's told this is what you're supposed to do, and then the company just puts hurdles in front of you or doesn't actively get involved in taking hurdles down? Yet you're still accountable. Like that'll crush your spirit over time. So
100%.
All right. So when you're hiring an executive, what do you look for? How do you screen to make sure? Because that's obviously an executive position. You got to make a good hire. You can't screw that one up. I mean, you can, but you don't want to. Like it's high risk.
Yeah, I mean, for me again, and we don't just do this at the senior level. Like as we improved our onboarding process, right? As we interview people, we're very big, and again, even sharing in that moment our vision, purpose, values, being very forthright in that. I'm very big. So as I interview senior leaders, we go even more in depth on that because I want to make sure there's someone I can trust, I can align with. And so you vet all that out. And now I'll be the first to say too, does every hire work out perfect even at that level? No. Like most of them, yes. But have there been a couple where I'm like, I wish I wouldn't have hired that person? Yeah. There has been a couple of those.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that's really what broke down. Even some of them started out great. But at the end of the day, there was some stuff going on that you didn't really know about, and some things happened. And, sadly that does happen, or some people deal with stress in their personal life and it bleeds into professional life. But you do your best to make sure that there's alignment first. I'm really big on fit matters more than skill in anything, but especially at that level.
Yeah. So how do you, if you're interviewing and screening somebody, how do you look for that cultural alignment? Like how do you look for the less technical side of the skill set? Like you've managed this many people, you've driven this much revenue, you've had this many locations under you, you have parts experience, you don't have parts experience, whatever.
Yeah.
The more important part of it, you said sort of that the core values alignment, the cultural alignment. How do you screen for that?
Yeah. I mean, it is a rigorous process. And I'd say first off, there's profiling I've done.
Yeah.
I've certain surveys, you profile people.
Yeah.
Have information there, feedback from other places they've worked, which is
Definitely.
limited to some degree. And of course, people try to be nice and those things, but whether it's with a previous boss or a manufacturer that used to work with them.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been through both of those, several rounds of interviews, not just with myself, but with other people, certain, people on the board, other senior team members. And then you want to make sure there's alignment. I mean, I've interviewed people where I've been excited about somebody, and a couple other people on the senior team were like, mm-mm.
Mm.
And I'm like, hey, if you guys don't feel good, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's good. It's frustrating for me on that side.
Yeah.
But I get it. I mean, I think what I'm hearing you say is recruiting, hiring is an imperfect process, even when you try to do it perfectly. And so the question then is, how quickly do you respond to that? What mitigation strategies do you put in place to try to shore that up and recover, or quickly come to it's time we need to cut ties, and to do that quickly?
Yeah. And I think, I've seen all kinds of situations there that are interesting, because there are some that become very blatantly clear very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And those might only last 90 days.
Yeah.
I've had some other situations. I've honestly had situations where I worked for someone for 5 years, and then some things really changed with that person, and I had to make a change. And those ones are gut wrenching, because when you've spent that much time in the trenches with somebody, that rips your heart out. That's just not like, I've had to let, obviously we've all had to let people go here and there for different reasons, but the ones like that are just gut wrenching. So some of them, like I said, some things kind of bleed out, over time. Some are very quickly. I'm a firm believer on hire slow and fire fast.
Yeah.
We've all heard the term. You do that as best as you can. I think you get into senior level roles too. They're even more crucial. They're harder to find, so you're really trying to vet out, you have those usually when you get to the point where you have to write somebody up, especially in a C-suite, that generally is never going to go that well.
Yeah, that's the beginning of the end. Whether you pull the trigger or they pull the trigger. Yeah, that really is a tell for sure.
Yeah. So it's hard. It's back to sports. I like it in there. And you already heard me talk about, when you build your roster and you have your right people, right seats. But it's back to sports, like some people work out in certain roles. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they may start their career doing good. And for some reason, I've seen ego destroy some great people.
The Dallas Cowboys.
Got an example.
Oh my gosh. A perfect example of how having some of the best talent doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win.
Correct.
That culture really is and people specifically, but the culture, the ecosystem that you create for people to thrive in, to be healthy, that is the mark. That's your sort of base ingredient. That's the sugar in your cookie recipe, In
my opinion, if you're truly a leader, your biggest joy and satisfaction as that leader doesn't come from you being in your seat and your title, doesn't come from the year that you hit X profit, and it's the best year of the company. Like, you want to have those years, right? In my opinion, like, real leadership comes down to, am I helping my people grow? Am I having a positive impact on my team first, on our customers, shareholder value, of course? But if you're not making a positive impact on your employees and team, like my greatest, what I feel my greatest success stories are personally, what gives me joy to think back and reflect on, because I love relationships with people. Like, my greatest satisfaction actually comes from the people I've found in the different parts of the organization. Like, I think this guy has it. You get them in a role and they succeed and they grow in their career and they're making a lot more money. And
you just change their life.
Yeah. There's nothing more rewarding.
Oh yeah, I agree. It's gratifying for sure. All right, we're coming here quickly to a close. All right, one last question. I'm kind of curious. This is kind of where career or work and family start to kind of overlap.
Yeah.
How interested are your kids in knowing what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Independently different. I would say 2 of my children, kind of not so much, like, you're just dad. And then I have 2 children that are very entrepreneur minded.
Okay.
So they're asking a lot of questions on business and financials and different things.
Are they
All
is it boy, girl? Is it age? Like, is there a common denominator on who's more interested than not?
No, I actually I have one daughter and one son that are really intrigued on different business.
Mhm.
Like our
That's
daughter,
awesome.
she started her own little business, so she's doing some stuff
Oh,
and
great.
works multiple jobs. Like she's just that's like her. I mean, like she's in sports. She's actually in lacrosse and does great.
Hmm.
But she's actually more interested in the business and other opportunities than she is in her sports, even though she loves her sports. So
Yeah.
that's fun to watch and see.
Are you disappointed that they haven't grown up on a farm and ranch operation? Do you feel
I'd
like they
lie.
got shortchanged?
In some ways, it's even our family business and farm has evolved so much from when I was growing up. It's just grown so much
Yeah.
that even if I was there, still they'd be having a different experience. Still a lot of the same, but different experience. And so, while I wish they could have some of those experiences, what they've had that I didn't have, we've moved so many times, and that can be hard on kids.
Yeah.
But we've also taught our kids like you're going to, I mean, as you know, the world's changed so much and the world's going to continue to change. And the more that these kids learn to adapt to change, the better they're going to be to handle their futures. And so we've tried to instill that in our children, and they've adapted so well everywhere we've been.
It's hard. That is such a hard thing. I mean, as a parent, you want, to provide for your kids, and you don't want to see them needlessly struggle. But sometimes, in most cases, in fact, that struggle, while it is temporarily discomforting, is a huge catalyst to who they become, how they mature, being able to experience some adversity and overcome it, even if it's just, I had to leave all my friends behind and move to this new place and make new ones,
Yeah.
But it's hard to make those choices, those decisions that are going to have that kind of an impact on them. Well, awesome. Well, this has been great. Any last or closing remarks? Anything we didn't cover that you want to touch on?
I mean, just to wrap up that last conversation, just like I can say this with my children, but I shared this so many times in business. It was actually one of my last speeches. I kind of hit on this with our sales team at a United. Growth again. Like everybody wants growth, right? Or everybody says they want growth. And, I say this with my kids all the time. And it's back to that same comment conversation we were having that, life is constant change. But everybody I've ever come across, if you ask them if they want growth, I've never met a person who says, no, I don't. Like I just haven't. And I'm sure some point I'll ask them. But then when you ask them, okay, what are you doing to grow? Or what are you doing to push yourself? And I love the analogy of muscles, right? Like everybody wants big muscles, but we also know muscle will literally only grow if you tear it, you stress it, and then you feed it the right nutrients and you get some rest. And that cycle constantly creates growth. But without the stress, right, and the workload,
right,
that's not going to happen.
And
so
I
think that
it's applied consistently. That's the key.
Yeah.
Because
exactly.
You can work out and have a really great workout once a quarter, and that you don't expect to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But that's the hardest part, is the consistency part.
Yes.
Again, we'll go back to Stephen Covey. He says that integrity is making and keeping promises to yourself, even the little promises of setting your alarm, and when it goes off, that you don't just hit the snooze button over and over again. That when you get up, when you don't want to get up, that's integrity building. That's that consistency. That's tough. Tough.
Yeah, it really is. That I believe is, at the end of the day, what stops so many people from, because you're right, that one workout, I had that conversation with my son in basketball as he's practicing. Like, hey, if you work out 1 hour a year, you don't get any better.
Right.
If you work out 1 hour a month, you really don't get any better either. If you work 1 hour a week, a little better.
Yeah.
1 hour a day, compounding interest.
Yeah.
like massive improvements. And so I love that because everybody wants growth. We have to realize what the price of growth is and ask ourselves, are we willing to pay it?
Right.
So like I'll just hit on that, but really I want to thank you, Jay.
Yeah.
We've had several conversations before this, like I said, and it's been great to get to know you.
Yeah,
You're a man of maturity and values. So I really appreciate this conversation.
Yeah, same. Well, I appreciate you making time and being willing to get behind a screen and share some of your thoughts. Let me pick your brain a little bit. I know there are a lot of people that are going to appreciate your perspective. There aren't a lot of people that can say they've done what you've done at any point in their career. And for you to be this early stage, I mean, you're an anomaly, and it's exciting to be able to sit down and spend some time with you. And I thank you for making time for me.
Thanks for that. And I feel blessed. Like you said, God's been good, and lots of hard work in front of all of us. And that's just what it takes every day. So thank you.
You bet.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Heavy Hitters. And if you found today's episode valuable, don't forget to follow and share. Now stay focused and stay tuned.